God bless you, each and every one, as you tune in today. We appreciate you so much for this wonderful time that we have together to be able to hear from our political candidates in the St. Louis region. This meeting is being hosted by the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition, along with all clergy of various organizations, as we seek to move forward during this time of pandemic that we're in. But in spite of the pandemic, in spite of the I would almost say the second wave of the civil rights movement, we don't want to lose focus. We don't want to forget that we need to register our citizens to vote, mobilize them to vote. We must not forget the 2020 census that we are in right now. We must also not forget the fact that we have a tremendous fight against crime in the St. Louis region. So here's what I want you to do right now. I want you to share with someone that this webinar has started. It is open to the public, and we're grateful for Dr. Starsky Wilson and the Deaconess Foundation that is hosting us on this webinar today. So please share with others as we seek to move forward and to hear from these elected officials and those that are seeking to be elected. At this time, obviously being clergy, we want to start things off right, and that is with prayer and with the scripture reading. So let's receive at this time Vice President Chuck Norris as he leads us in prayer and scripture reading. Reverend Norris.
Thank you, Bishop Hankerson. Let us pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we come before you this morning to say thank you, God. We want to thank you, God, for bringing us together. Thank you, God, for waking us this morning. But most of all, thank you for your new mercy and your breath of fresh air that you've breathed on us this morning. Now we pray right now that you breathe a spirit of peace, of joy, of kindness, of respect, of love, but most of all, encouragement, God. Be with us today as we move forth with this city, as you continue to do a new thing in a new way. But most of all, God, you are not a new God. And so we pray, God, that you continue to be the healer of the breach. You continue to have balm in Gilead, but most of all, that you continue to send the healing that is needed throughout the land. It is in your Son, Jesus the Christ, we pray and we thank you, God. Amen.
Amen.
Scripture reading.
I'll be reading the 27th Psalm, which says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell." Dropping down to the 13th verse, it says, "I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord."
Amen.
Thank you so much. Such a very appropriate scripture reading that we have received, as well as a spirit-filled prayer. If you have friends or family or loved ones or clergy that are having difficulty chiming in, because I'm getting a lot of texts, please let them know that they don't have to put a # after the password. Simply hit the link. You'll be asked for the password. You place that in, hit enter, and you should get into the call or get into the Zoom. Actually, also, you can call. Your friends and family can call 312-626-6799. Put in the webinar ID and then also the password, and they will be able to participate. But we have a lot of business to cover at this time. And I don't see Reverend Jones, but we're grateful that Reverend Darrell Gray, our political advisor for the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition, is on. And he is going to help moderate this particular time. And we appreciate him and all of what he's done. He's a Superman, I tell you, out there in the streets, out there passing out masks. And I thought I had a lot of energy, but he definitely has energy that is divinely appropriated.
Amen.
And so, Reverend Gray, we appreciate you so much, and thank you for this time, and we want you to lead us forward as we hear from the candidates for office at this time. Reverend Darrell Gray.
All right, thank you, Brother President, and to Vice President Norris. I appreciate the opportunity. Just some ground rules for everybody. We have 5 categories that we are going to be talking to today: St. Louis Sheriff, St. Louis Treasurer, St. Louis Circuit Attorney, 5th Senatorial Legislative District and the St. Louis County Executive. It was the decision of the political committee to focus on the city with the exception of the county executive, which many believe is a priority candidacy in this region. All of the candidates have confirmed, all of the candidates that we reached out to confirmed. So we want to make sure that everyone knows all of the candidates that we reached out to confirmed, were notified, and we're hoping they'll be on. Each candidate will have 3 minutes opening remarks. I will be timing them. I'll let them know at 30 when they have 30 seconds left. And each candidate will be asked 2 questions. Each candidate will receive the same questions. There are no gotcha questions. These are questions that have come from the public. These are questions that have come from within the clergy. And we have already apprised candidates that we do not endorse, but we are obligated to educate and inform voters. So with that, Brother President, we do have 1 more minute before the first session begins. We do want folk to know that we are following and will receive your questions in the chat room, in the Q&A. We'll look at those questions. We'll vet those questions. We've made it very clear to the candidates that we are the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition. And in so, we will not tolerate character attacks or character assassination. We will not tolerate any messiness in this forum. Our obligation, our intention is simply to get information from the candidates so that we can properly and adequately and effectively inform members of our congregation and voters. So it is that time, 11:10. We will begin with the first set of candidates. I do see one. This is for St. Louis Sheriff. There are 2 candidates, Alfred Montgomery and the incumbent Sheriff Vernon Betts. We do have Sheriff Betts, and we'll begin with him. Sheriff Betts, welcome. Can we hear you? Make sure that we're not muted.
I'm here.
You have 3 minutes for your opening. I will time you, Sheriff Betts. And when we get to 30 seconds, I'll let you know 30 seconds so that you can begin to wind down.
Reverend Gray, I do see Alfred on the screen. So
good. So Alfred, if Alfred is on the screen, I'm sorry, Brother Alfred, you were first. Are you there, sir?
He's muted.
I'm here.
Okay, Brother Alfred, I'm sorry. You're going to go first. We usually have the incumbents last. Thank you very much, Brother Alfred, for being on. And so Alfred Montgomery is a candidate for sheriff. We're giving you the first 3 minutes of opening remarks, and I will let you know at the 30-second mark, and you can begin now, Mr. Montgomery.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Alfred Montgomery. I want to thank Reverend Darrell Gray for having me on today in the Deaconess Coalition. I am a millennial, a father, and a soon-to-be husband. I am a St. Louis native. I was born and raised in the 5th Ward. I've been in politics all my life. I'm a former deputy sheriff for the St. Louis City Sheriff Department. I have 4 years of law enforcement experience with St. Louis City Police Department. I'm also a behavior intervention specialist, and I am a certified licensed funeral director. I am running for sheriff for the city of St. Louis, as you guys may know, to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers while keeping drugs kept out of a secured government building, and while eliminating patronage hiring practices, which puts the sheriff's office at risk and also the public. I'm also running to post-certify each and every one of our sheriff deputies. I'm also running to give the sheriff department 21st century technology and policy upgrades to include police body cameras and vehicles cameras while transporting prisoners. Because I believe criminal justice reform is necessary in order to move our city forward. And most important, our community needs to see transparency and integrity restored to our sheriff's office because they deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sheriff Betts, you have 3 minutes for your opening remarks.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Clergy Coalition, Bishop Hankerson, Bishop Norris, Reverend Norris, and Brother Gray. Appreciate you all for giving me the opportunity to come before you today. Well, I think most of you, and Brother Norris, that scripture right on point, one of my favorite scriptures, 27th Psalm. Of course, all of you all know I'm a licensed and ordained minister, born and raised in St. Louis. I have 2 degrees. I have a degree in criminal justice, and I have a degree in education. I'm a former St. Louis public school teacher. I'm a retired supervisor from Ameren, where I retired out of the information technology function. I did 30 years at Ameren, and I have been a St. Louis sheriff. I was a St. Louis sheriff deputy for 3 years, and now I've been the sheriff of the city of St. Louis for 4 years. I am a member of the Clergy Coalition. I'm a member of the NAACP. I am a member of the Urban League. I'm a member of the 100 Black Men. I'm a member of my neighborhood association, the St. Louis Place Neighborhood Association, and I am a member of the Missouri Sheriff's Association and the National Sheriff's Association. I have 168 hours of post-certified experience as a St. Louis Sheriff, and post-certification is one of the things that I've been working on from the time that I started as sheriff. We want to get our sheriff's post. Brother Gray, are you saying something to me? I can't hear Brother Gray if you're saying something to me. But anyway, Brother Gray?
You're fine. I think he's just.
I'm here.
Okay, I thought he was trying to say something to me.
No.
Reverend Bishop Hankerson. Am I through?
No, you've got 1 minute left.
Okay, well, I think most of you know where I've been these last 4 years. We served as sheriff during the civil unrest 4 years ago. I think we handled that situation pretty good. No one ever got hurt inside the civil courts, the 2 buildings that I'm in charge of. We've made several changes in our operation here. We started out by, first of all, raising the salary of the St. Louis Sheriff deputies from $27,000 to now starting salary $32,600. We were just able, just 2 weeks
30
ago.
30 seconds.
Okay, we were able to get the sheriffs abundant. We've done a number of changes, and when you talk about increasing the technology, it would take more than the 2-3 minutes that I've been given to talk about all of the upgrades and the things that we've done here at the St. Louis Sheriff Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Betts. We'll begin the questioning with Mr. Montgomery. How would you ensure integrity of your office while maintaining public safety, managing relationships with law enforcement, and providing diversity within your workplace?
I believe that coming in as the sheriff, the first thing that you have to do is break down each unit by unit. You have to dissect unit by unit in the sheriff's office. You have to provide the training, the sensitivity training needed for that unit. And then you go to the next unit and you do the same until you do the entire sheriff's office. That's how you restore integrity. That's how you restore credibility, by training. Training is the #1 priority that all law enforcement is supposed to have.
Thank you very much. Sheriff Betts, same question, I'll repeat it. How would you ensure integrity of your office while maintaining public safety, managing relationships with law enforcement, and providing diversity in your workplace?
Well, in order to maintain that integrity, you have to be involved in the community. It's got to start with the top. And so I think most of you all know that I'm out in the community. You have to continue to be involved in the community, several different capacities. I think, like I've said, part of the NAACP, the 100 Black Men. You have to bring the public in and let the public be a part of the direction that you're trying to take your department. So that's one of the things we've also have done. We have a relationship with several folks throughout the community that give me guidance on what they think the sheriff department should be doing. Reverend Gray, that last part of that question I wanted to really answer. What was the last part of that question?
And providing diversity in the workplace.
As you know, I came from Ameren, where you had to definitely make sure that the company reflected the people that we served. I brought that same philosophy here. I presently have, in my supervisory capacity, if I count my chief of staff, Steve Roberts, I have exactly 11 black and 11 white. I have 49% white deputies and 52% black. I've tried to stay as close to that 50-50%, and the only reason why it's not 50-50 is because I've had a hard time hiring whites. Just seems for some reason with the civil unrest and all the stuff going on that people are not interested in becoming law enforcement employees. So right now we stand at a 48 to 52%, 52% black, 48% white.
Thank you very much. Because both of you have answered your questions within the 3-minute range, we still have a couple of minutes. So what we'll do is, Mr. Montgomery, if you would take 2 minutes and make closing statements, followed by Sheriff Betts.
When it comes to diversity in our sheriff's office, it's not really about targeting whether they're white or black, because sometimes color don't necessarily bring diversity. You need people who understands what diversity means. People who understands that Black lives do matter, and not just because of, hey, he's black, his life matter. We're talking about Black lives matter when it comes to hiring. And even when it comes to whites being, a Caucasian being hired in the sheriff's office, you just don't want a white face. You want a Caucasian person who's able to get the job done and who's able to work with their employees or employers to get the job done. There's too many times that people of Caucasian officers has took the lives of young millennials, young African-American millennials like myself. Therefore, when it comes to diversity, we need to not only hire them just because of their color, we need to hire them knowing that they will go out into the street and protect those citizens of the city of St. Louis like it's their own.
Thank you very much. Sheriff Betts, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Well, again, I want to thank the clergy for having us today. I hope that what you've seen over the 4 years and my serving as your sheriff, you'll continue to get that kind of integrity. My door is always open to anybody that wants to come down and visit with the sheriff. My phone, I get a lot of calls every day, and I never turn anybody down. For all kind of situations, you'll continue to get that over the next 4 years. I have some goals I want to make. I've been fighting from the time I came in office. I want to get the sheriff department post-certified. And Reverend Gray and Bishop Hankerson, I think you all know I've been fighting for that, getting these guys trained. We need training, as you see now, out in every law enforcement agency has a strand of racism, and we need sensitivity training throughout, even in the sheriff department. And then it needs to be done over and over, year after year. I hope we can institute that kind of program. I hope we can get post-certified. And lastly, I hope that we can get our guys paid a little bit better than what they're getting paid. All my guys work secondary jobs. They're working like Hebrew slaves. And if we can get them paid a little bit better after getting them post-trained, I think we can help to have a better atmosphere. Guys not sleepy and bored and tired, and can go home to their families energized and ready to do the great work that we need to do as a St. Louis Sheriff Department. Thank you all so much. God bless you. I got you in my prayers.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. And the good news is you came, again, y'all came right under time. Thank you again. That was our first set of candidates. You have Wilfred Montgomery, who is running. You have the incumbent, Sheriff Vernon Batts. We want to see, we're going to take a look and see if the
Correction,
next candidate,
Alfred Montgomery, I'm sorry.
Alfred Montgomery. I want to call you Wilfred so bad. I think I've done that. Hey, Alfred, I think I've said that to you a couple of times, and you just looked at me and smiled. Mr. Alfred Montgomery is running, and incumbent Sheriff Vernon Batts. Our next set of candidates, Bishop, are scheduled to be on at 11:25. So we have 2 minutes. And so what we'll do, Bishop, if you have any remarks in between, you or Vice President Norris, as we await the next two candidates.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate that first set of candidates and for your astuteness, and thank you for the wonderful comments. As we have another couple minutes before we go into the next session, please don't forget to use your influence as members of the clergy to encourage people to be a part of the Census 2020. This is very important. And again, I believe we as the coalition, along with other clergy organizations, have proven the fact that we have been of assistance and concerned about our citizens through COVID-19. We have also participated in the events dealing with injustice in our nation, the movement that has emanated not really just so much from the George Floyd incident, but so many incidents that have occurred throughout the years. And so with that in mind, we are not shifting our focus, we are maintaining our focus through everything that has occurred. And so again, Census 2020, and of course we will continue to do everything that is within our power to help alleviate our crime rate, which is still at an all-time high, even though we've been in COVID-19 and the movement against injustice. So please remember that, and we stress that. And we're grateful and thankful for all of our participants for chiming in and being a part of this setting. Thank you so much, Reverend Gray.
All right, we are ready for the second group. We have, this is for St. Louis Treasurer. As we indicated, each candidate will have 3 minutes for their opening remarks. Each candidate will be asked 2 questions. They're the same 2 questions, and each will be given 3 minutes to respond. What we've elected to do is allow the incumbents to give their opening remarks last. So we do have Alderman Jeffrey Boyd and incumbent Treasurer, Mr. Shara Jones. We're grateful, glad to have you. We will begin with Alderman Boyd. You have 3 minutes to make your opening remarks.
He needs to unmute.
You need to unmute, Alderman. Can we
Sorry
unmute
about
him?
that.
That's all right.
Still getting used to this after 3 weeks, right? So anyway, I just wanted to reintroduce myself to people. I've been married almost 30 years. I have 3 children. I have 1 grandbaby. I have spent 23 years serving my country, retired Master Sergeant. I'm 17 years on the Board of Aldermen, the second most senior alderman, chairman of the Black Caucus. Also served as chairman of Streets, Refuse, and Traffic. As chairman of that committee, I also serve on the Parking Commission. The Parking Commission basically reports to, not reports to, but the Parking Division reports to the Treasurer. The city receives only 40% of excess revenues annually, and that makes no sense. We should receive 100%. The current treasurer made a commitment 8 years ago that she would transfer parking operations to city government because it made no sense. It was a good idea then, it's a good idea today. But unfortunately, the current treasurer is using hundreds of thousands of dollars to sue to keep it as is, status quo, up to the Supreme Court level, wasting taxpayers' dollars. I want to be a treasurer that works collectively with city government, with the board of ENA, the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the board of aldermen that sets the budget. Because the treasurer duties involve depositing money that is given to the city, as well as making good investment strategies. That is the basics of what a treasurer is, not dealing with parking. I want to be a treasurer for the whole city. I care about the credit rating of the city as a whole. I don't want to be a treasurer just for parking operations. And so working collectively My integrity matters to me, having served 20 years in the military. When I make a campaign promise, you can hold me to task for it. And I think it's very important when we do as candidates make promises that the community holds us to that. I want to be somebody that you can trust and that you can count on. So I'm asking you to vote for me for treasurer.
Thank you, Alderman. Treasurer Jones, you have 3 minutes in your opening remarks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Reverend Gray and other reverends and pastors of Clergy Coalition. Thank you for hosting this forum today. My name is Tashara Jones, and I am the treasurer of the City of St. Louis. I'm proud to announce that I'm running for re-election for a third term. I'd like to bring entrepreneurship and innovation into everything that I do. And since 2012, I brought new thinking, new technology, and new programs into the treasurer's office. As a result, the city has the best parking app in the region, parking meters have been upgraded, and the number of parking tickets written is decreasing. At the same time, the parking fund and our investments have contributed more money to the city coffers than ever before. We did this by looking at what innovations have worked elsewhere, by adapting new technology to old problems, and by learning from our past and other cities. We've transformed the treasurer's office into a 21st century department, showcasing entrepreneurship, transparency, and accountability, just as I promised to do 8 years ago. I'm asking you to re-elect me not just because I'm the incumbent. I'm asking you to re-elect me because I'm committed to investing in our city's most important asset, its people. I've proven this by banning the box, increasing minimum wage to $15 an hour, and starting the nation's second largest children's savings program, College Kids, which presently has over 16,000 children with over $1.1 million saved for their futures. And during these uncertain times, it's important that we put politics aside. This is a time when we should be serving the people who elected us. And that's exactly what I've been doing. We started phone banking in April, not to ask for support, but to ask people how they're doing and giving them tips for survival for the pandemic. I've done this online as well, as this is the new normal for a lot of us. I started a web series called Tips with the Treasurer, where we interview community leaders twice a week and give out important information. We've covered renters' rights, homeowners' options, SBA assistance, unemployment, insurance, mental health awareness, and more. I want to continue to serve you with transparency and integrity. Re-elect me, Tashara Jones, on August 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. So each candidate will receive the same question. There are 2 questions. Ms. Jones, because you were last, now you'll be first. And then Alderman Boyd. Some would see the office of treasurer as one of the less glamorous positions in city government. Some would even suggest that it be appointed an appointment by the mayor. Why is it important to keep this position elected or not?
Well, in many cities, the treasurer is appointed. There are very few cities across the country where the treasurer is elected. And where they are, I have relationships with those cities. San Francisco, Richmond, Virginia, Chicago, for example. I've called those treasurers my mentors and friends. And, you know, the treasurer isn't a sexy job. And I think it all depends on our city charter. When it was set, and also the founding of the city. When it was set, they had the treasurer as elected. You know, I'd be open to any conversation that makes sure that our government is accountable to the people, but also evolving with the times. So, right, it's not sexy, but I'm open to anything that serves the people.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Alderman Boyd, the same question, I'll repeat it. Some would see the office of treasurer as one of the less glamorous positions in city government. Some would even suggest that it be an appointed position by the mayor. Why is it important to keep this position elected or not?
Well, quite frankly, most people should know that the city of St. Louis has a very archaic form of government. We have a very weak mayoral system. Coming up at 2023, we're going to reduce the Board of Aldermen from 28 to 14. Some people suggest that is a very good first step in making our government a little more efficient. I am definitely unopposed to making the treasurer's office appointed. I think that is some good conversation to have. If they want to put it on the ballot, I serve at the will of the people, and I would not object to it.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman, this question goes to you first. The voice of all citywide officials are critical at this time in providing leadership. Do you support airport privatization? Is it good or bad for North St. Louis? Why or why not?
That's a very good question. From what I'm hearing in the community, North St. Louis is supposed to get $1 billion or several $100 million to be rebuilt. I would tell people part of my value system is not to privatize government. I believe when we privatize government, we give away some of that responsibility. We will always be held accountable, but we will be giving away our fiduciary responsibility to be responsible for the service that will be delivered to our constituents. I'm open-minded. I'm willing to have more conversation. If you ask me today, how would I vote? I would say no on privatization. But I will be open-minded, and I'm willing to listen to the will of the people, because again, I report to the people, and I'm elected, and we're all duly elected to do the will of the people.
Thank you, Alderman. Treasurer Jones, the same question. I will repeat it. The voice of all citywide elected officials are critical in providing leadership. Do you support airport privatization? Is it good or bad for North St. Louis? Why or why not?
So I think that let's take a step back and look at what airport privatization really is, which is trying to capitalize on the asset of the airport and see what we can do to monetize that and make it make more money, right? And that's why so many people have been trying to steal that asset away from the city. And yes, I use that word purposely, steal. I think that we have within the city a will to look at the airport as an asset and put together a plan to capitalize on that asset to bring more money into the city's coffers. We need to do that not just with the airport, but with all of our streams of revenue. I don't know the last time that we've taken a look at our revenue streams to see how we can diversify them, what changes we can make to bring in more money to the city coffers in other places, what we can do with tax incentive reform so we can make sure that developers don't get tax incentives for projects that would be built without the tax incentive there. Let's take a look at the airport, yes, but let's take a look at all of our revenue streams to see how we can bring in more revenue for the city as a whole.
Thank you very much, Treasurer. And because you both have gone under your time, we have an opportunity to give you both 2 minutes for closing remarks. Alderman Boyd, if you would like to begin, you have 2 minutes for closing.
Sure, thank you. I think the treasurer is a very important function of city government. Again, I want to be a treasurer who works collectively with all elected officials. I think it's very important that the treasurer works with the mayor's office, the board of aldermen, and other government officials. It's very critical. We are one team. What I've learned in the Army is that we can't do it by ourselves. If one of the divisions of the Army fails, the whole unit fails. And I want to be a treasurer who's responsible with the taxpayers' dollars. I don't want to waste taxpayers' dollars. I want to end this no-bid contract system. I want to end extending contracts for 5 and 6 years without going out for rebid, because that's not fair to the taxpayers. We could be getting better deals if we go out on a regular basis, like maybe every 3 years, instead of just keep extending contracts. I want to make sure that you know that I'm a treasurer that's not above the law, that I will follow local ordinances, state statutes, and federal guidelines in the discharge of my duties. At the end of the day, integrity matters, transparency matters. It's not about just saying it, it's about doing it. People that know me know my value system. There's certain values that come along with someone who served in the military. The Army celebrated 245th birthday on Sunday. That meant a lot to me. I've learned a lot. I learned how to be a strong African-American man from serving in my country. I've learned how to be a strong advocate for my community by serving 17 years as an alderman.
30 seconds.
As the next treasurer, I will make sure I discharge my duties in a way that will make St. Louis proud. Thank you, and I ask you for your support.
Thank you, Alderman. Treasurer Jones, you have 2 minutes for your closing.
Yes, I want to address the idea of working together. Right now, we have 7 Black citywide office officials out of 9, and we have a number of Black aldermen and progressive aldermen, and we don't use the power we have. We can't be too busy, we're too busy fighting each other to fight racism and the other things that go on in this community. And for people to think that I am not working for this community is false. The clergy on this call know that I have worked with you, worked with your churches, and trying to spread the message of financial empowerment, because that's the only way our people are going to get free. We have to learn to speak the language of money. And I've done that for the last 5 years with the Office of Financial Empowerment, which provides free credit counseling and money management services to all citizens, no matter where they live in the region. And our most important success story is this just happened last year. It's going to blow your mind. We had a woman we were working with last year who came to us in January. She increased her credit score by 250 points by the end of the year and bought her first home. Aren't those the kind of success stories we want to duplicate and replicate around this region, to have Black home ownership increase, to have Black wealth increase? Because right now, the difference between a white family's wealth and Black family's wealth is 10 times. We cannot be economically free if we don't learn the language of money. And I want to continue that service as your treasurer and spread that message far and wide across this region. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer Jones. Thank you, Alderman Boyd, very much for your participation. Bishop, we've got a minute in between before the next session, which would be the St. Louis Circuit Attorney. Reverend Norris, if Dr. Norris is still on, I'm sure he's there somewhere, but Bishop, do you have any remarks in between the next session?
Yeah, just in between real quickly, I want to acknowledge Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould with Missouri Faith Voices. She is on with us. And again, Dr. Starsky Wilson, who is our host today with the Deaconess Foundation. So we're grateful for the ecumenical camaraderie that we have as far as the clergy associations being here to hear these candidates. Reverend Norris?
Since we're here for candidates forum, I just want to continue to encourage people to get out to vote, to register, to get our students, while they may have had to do distant learning, just to encourage them to get, if they're in your house and turning 18, make sure they get registered to vote, for us to continue to pound the pavement in the midst of this coronavirus, that all of this goes for naught if we don't turn out to the polls to vote.
All right, thank you both. I think we're ready. David, I know I saw Miss Mary Pat Carl. Is Circuit Attorney Gardner on? Do we see her? Is she on, Bishop? Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner?
I'm not seeing her on my list here. As far as who's on, I'm not seeing her.
All right. Well, we did submit information to her office. And so this is the time. No one indicated from the office that she did not get the information. So we're going to go ahead with the candidate who is on. That's the process. So this is the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office. The candidates are Mary Pat Carl and the incumbent Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. As we indicated, each candidate will have 3 minutes for opening remarks, and then each candidate will be asked a question. And so welcome, Ms. Carl. We'll begin with you with your 3-minute opening remarks. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, just slow computer, slow to respond. And then I have to be patient, because then sometimes I hit it and I accidentally mute myself again after I've unmuted myself. But good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for doing this. I know that there's a lot going on right now, and it means a lot. I think that you're all willing to take time out of your day and schedules for all of these very important races. Like I say, my name is Mary Pat Carl. I'm running for circuit attorney, and tell you a little bit about myself. In 2011, I gave birth to a bouncing baby 10-pound boy named Jack. And right after I gave birth to him, I contracted something called Bell's palsy. For most people, Bell's palsy lasts a couple weeks. It's a minor inconvenience. And for those that don't know what that is, it's a facial paralysis. You can see it in my face right now. There's a nerve that runs behind your ear into your face, the 7th cranial nerve. It becomes restricted. And for most people, like I said, it lasts a couple weeks, and it's embarrassing. It's you don't go out to eat, and you sleep with an eye patch, and then just as fast as it came, it leaves again. Mine was suffered during childbirth. But my maternity leave ticked by, and I got to the end of my 12 weeks, and I was just as paralyzed as I was the first day. I didn't understand why at the time, but I was in tremendous pain. Later, when I got a better understanding of what was going on, it was as if I had 100 Charlie horses in my face on any given day, nerves contracting all the time. And I was very self-conscious. I was a bit depressed. I was managing an infant at home. I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I couldn't move the right side of my face. And I had to go back to work, and I talked to people for a living. I stood in front of people every day, and I stood at a crossroads. Did I return to the job that I loved and push through what was both physical and emotional and mental anguish? Or did I walk away from that job that I loved and take a job where you sit behind a desk and advocate for people on paper at a law firm? And by the way, those jobs tend to pay more too. So I found out something about myself in that moment, and something that I think many people on this call are tapping into every day in COVID. You're helping your congregations tap into it right now. That's the power of resilience. That ability we have to dig deep in the most difficult times and push through pain and actually make a change in our lives for better. That's the same message that I want to bring to the criminal justice system. Right now, we have people that are entering the criminal justice system, and it's a life-defining moment. It will determine the path that they take for the rest of their lives. I think that we can actually use that moment and put them on a path for better. I think that we can surround people with the right tools and the right support, and we can tell them that they possess that same resilience, and they can push through that what is a temporary pain to find something better on the other side. We owe people alternative to incarceration. We owe people that support. We also owe it to our victims. Right now, we have people that enter the criminal justice system as victims. They are undergoing tremendous trauma in their lives.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay.
We owe them that same power to tap into that resilience. That's the message that I want to bring to the criminal justice system, that message of hope and that message of taking pain and bringing something good.
Thank you very much. We still don't have the circuit attorney on yet, so we will begin with asking the questions. There we go. All right, we thought that we had messed something up and that we didn't notify your office, so we were already beginning to make apologies, writing them up. So, Madam Circuit Attorney, you have 3 minutes for your opening remarks.
Hello, I'm Kim Gardner, Circuit Attorney for the City of St. Louis, and I want everyone to know, regardless of your race, your background, your sexual orientation, or station in life, your lives matter, your safety matters, your dreams and ambitions matter, and simply your dignity matters. And what I'm simply saying is that you matter. But for some, they don't feel we matter. They demand, they don't think the demand for reform matters. They don't think that the truth matters. Not only the truth, when I show documentation that I didn't let 36 people go, the Post-Dispatch editorial board doubled down on their lie and published a lie in the editorial. And I want you to understand what the Circuit Attorney's race is all about. It's about trying to bring an old oppressive criminal justice system that contributed to the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that led to the death of George Floyd. It's the same old system that led to the 20 plus years that Lamar Johnson has languished in prison for a crime where there is overwhelmingly evidence of his innocence. It's the same oppressive system that has over 90% chance of an African American being stopped by police than a white person in this state of Missouri. And that's a 15-year history, highest history ever in this state. It's simple. It's the old versus the new, theory versus reality, real versus fake, lies versus truth. And it's about the real-term solutions to address the root causes of crime while holding serious violent offenders accountable. It's about making sure our criminal justice system is fair for everyone in our city. Now, what I tell you, that does not matter. And I'm gonna tell you, who is not gonna let me stop reforming the system? It's the police union and the business manager, Jeff Rorter, doesn't matter. It's the Trump wannabe Missouri Attorney General, along with others that continue to have lies and divisive rhetoric and this fear of taking it back to the mass incarceration of yesteryear. It's the status quo and guardians who my opponent in her who's who list, who support her, who doesn't believe reform matters. And what really matters is justice, and justice for all. And that's why I'm running for re-election, because it's about reforming a system that we all know needs to be rebuilt, dismantled, and restructured for justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Ms. Carl, you have the first question. It's the same question for both. How would you ensure integrity of your office while maintaining public safety, managing relationships with law enforcement, and providing fair justice?
Thank you. One, I think that an office needs to have integrity. It needs to be transparent. I think that we shouldn't have to beg for statistics from our elected officials. Elected officials owe people the data. We've talked a lot over the last couple of years about being smart on crime. What does being smart on crime mean? It means making decisions based on data. I think that data belongs to the people. So to increase the integrity of the office, to allow people to trust the system, I'm gonna roll up the shades and I'm gonna show people what's going on. I pledge to publish all my statistics. I'll say what cases the police have brought to me, and I'll give you the dynamics of what those cases are. Who are they arresting? What are their race? What are their genders? What areas of the city do they live in? And then I'll tell you what we've issued as an office. I'll let the people judge whether or not the circuit attorney's office is being fair, because the fairness is in the numbers. We also need to build a diverse staff, but that staff also needs to be stable. It does nothing to hire a diverse staff if they leave as fast as they come. So I think that we need to rebuild from the inside. We're down to 17 trial attorneys. Then cases are being handed off from one attorney to another. That's not stability. When cases are getting dismissed in a courtroom because there isn't anyone there to try them, that's not stability, and that's not integrity of a system. No one can believe in that. So I think that, and I also bring in people to evaluate implicit bias. I won't grade my own paper. I'm gonna ask an organization to come inside that hasn't supported me in the past, maybe didn't endorse me in an election, and certainly didn't contribute any money to me. And I'll ask that group to come in and examine the circuit attorney for bias, because they're certainly going to have the most watchful eye. But I believe that I can build an office that can pass that test.
Thank you, Ms. Carl. Circuit Attorney Gardner, the same question, I will repeat it. How would you ensure integrity of your office while maintaining public safety, managing relationships with law enforcement, and providing fair justice?
First of all, speaking truth and not lies. It's starting out like anyone else who commits crimes in our community, and that's what we've done. It's enacting the exclusion list like I've done in my office, where if you're not credible, or you make false reports, or you have a history of being investigated, or issues with credibility, you will not entertain any case because of your ability to taint the whole criminal justice system and to take away life and liberty. So I'm not talking theory of what I would do. This is what I've done. And when you talk about transparency, let's be transparent in the numbers. When you have no facts to back up lies what Ms. Carl is talking about in terms of 17 attorneys know the facts, but she can't because she's also talking about the lies and misinformation perpetuated by Jeff Porter, who supports her and the police union. So when you talk about facts is we have high turnover in our office from day one. And when you've changed a system and a culture that promotes fairness and justice for all, people will leave, just like she did. And when you talk about transparency, we are transparent in making sure our data is correct, and it has to be right. So when you release that data to the public, it has a context, which we have done. So we are, when you talk about facts, we brought those thought leaders and transparency inside our office by having a data analyst division in our office, which has never existed, even when Mary Pat was in office. So when this transparency she's talking about has never taken place when she was there, nor when she was in any position, I don't know what she's talking about. That's theory. So we've done that. At the same time, we use data to drive our decisions, who we charge, what we charge, when we charge, and we've done that. And when you talk about trials, less than 4% of our work is in trials. Over 97% of our work is in pleas and dispositions and alternatives. So when you want to talk about truth, be truthful. That you want to guide the office by less than 4% of the work, that's just not sound practice or truth conversation. We don't have 17 attorneys in our office, and people did leave. People left because it's a challenging, low-paying job, and that's why I asked for $1.5 million ever in the history of the office to give across-the-board pay raises to individuals who want to retain and be in my office. We implemented training programs in our office to keep those valuable attorneys. But change comes with people leaving. And actually, 1 year in our office, because we try more cases than any other jurisdiction, is like 10 years anywhere else. And they're very marketable. So these young men and women go on to better and more high-paying jobs, like Mary Pat did.
30
so
seconds. 30 seconds.
And we talk about transparency. Let's be transparent that the numbers she's talking about have been lies from day one, even our conviction rate. We have a 97% felony conviction rate, and that's the truth.
Thank you. The second question, it will be to the circuit attorney first, and then Ms. Carl. Do you support closing the workhouse immediately? What will you do to help break the back and forth at the city level regarding its status, including recent efforts to place a non-binding poll on the ballot?
First of all, like I said, day one, I'm for reforming the whole system. I'm not the facilities managers of the workhouse, and I think that question is best posed for who is over the workhouse, which is the mayor and the public safety director. And I think that I support anything the public supports. But what I will support and what I've done is I've reduced the prison population. So you do not need the workhouse because the population has been lowered since I've implemented reforms of pretrial release, as well as alternative diversion programs. And I will continue to support those programs. But I support reforming the whole pretrial system like we've done.
Thank you. Ms. Carl? I'll read the question over. Do you support closing the workhouse immediately? What would you do to help break the back and forth at the city level regarding its status, including recent efforts to place a non-binding poll on the ballot?
I do support closing the workhouse. The only pause I have is immediate because I want to make sure the people that work there, that we find them jobs, that we can move them to somewhere else. I don't want to put anybody out of work. So I want to make sure that we have a wind down period where we are ready to do this, ready to do it safe. So in the very near future, I would say, rather than just the word immediate, we can't close it tomorrow, we can close it this year. So, and I always support hearing what the public thinks. If the public wants to respond, but I think that, we need to arm the public with information. It is easy to respond emotionally, but look, right now we're spending $16 million to house 196 people. And I find it hard to believe that when most people are armed with that information and learn that we don't have we only have nonviolent offenders in MSI, that there are alternatives to keeping people safe than keeping them in MSI, and that most of the people that are pretrial incarcerated in MSI end up ultimately on probation. And I think that it is a disservice that we remove people from their support systems, their jobs, and their lives in pretrial incarceration, and then we release them on probation and expect them to be immediately successful. So I think that we're $16 million. We can spend that better supporting individuals to get them on a path before then. I would immediately start a clean slate program like Manhattan does, where it allows people to go out into the community and check if they have warrants for their arrest. Then if they do, they can get reset right then and there and get a new court date. I don't know about all of you. I've missed doctor's appointments. I've missed coffee with friends. I have transportation that I don't have to rely on public transportation. I think that we can't let people be sitting incarcerated because they've missed court dates. It says also that doesn't serve a victim because the case pauses. And if I have a couple seconds left, I do want to address some misinformation. I don't have a relationship with Jeff Orta. I didn't serve in the House with him. I didn't co-sponsor legislation with Jeff Orta. I'm not friends with Jeff Orta. I don't have a police officer endorsement here in 2020. Yeah. I sat in a room with my opponent. She also asked for that endorsement in 2016. She went in ahead of me. I actually thought that I was going to be at a disadvantage because I knew that they had worked together in the House. And I knew that they had a relationship where they respected each other.
20 seconds.
So, thank you.
Let me just say, you could refuse to take an endorsement.
You'll have an opportunity. Ms. Gardner, you have an opportunity. You'll, in closing remarks, you have an opportunity. I'm sorry, you have 10 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I have not sought the Police Officer Association endorsement. I haven't sought the Ethical Society of Police endorsement either. I've not sought those union endorsements.
Your time. Thank you. Ms. Carl, we're going to give you 2 minutes to make your closing remarks, followed by Ms. Gardner. Beginning now.
Thank you. So we absolutely need to look at reforms in our country, in our region, in our city, and in the criminal justice system. But I believe those reforms are best made by being accountable, by being transparent, and by working with others and building relationships. Tearing each other down doesn't get us anywhere. When people lob insults, when people go to war and talk about people being adversaries, my opponent says that the police are her adversary. She said it in an interview. We need to be transparent. My opponent says that she's been transparent with data, but in a Carol Daniels interview, when she was asked to share that data, she criticized that she wasn't asked the right way. There's no wrong way to ask somebody to be transparent. The diversion programs by my opponent's own calculations published on a PowerPoint. So no misinformation. I got them from her, from neighborhood meetings. The number of people screened for alternative incarcerations dropped in 2017, 2018, and 2019. 3 years, we screened fewer people for alternatives to incarceration than we did in its first year under the previous administration. 3 years, people suffered a disadvantage that they weren't screened at the same rate that the year in its infancy. So we need to screen people for alternatives, not in an election year. We need to do that all along the way. My opponent had to return, I think, $1 million, maybe more dollars to the Board of Aldermen. It's on the Ways and Means. You can log in and see it, because she didn't get the programs done that she wanted to do. I ran on these same issues in 2016. I'm no different today in 2020. You can go back there. There is nothing different than I'm saying. My opponent says that she's accomplished things and that people have left.
Your time is up.
Have left for Mr. Bell's office in the county.
Your time is up, Ms. Carl.
Reform.
Thank you very much. Circuit Attorney Gardner, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
Well, it's about, like I said, theory versus reality. I don't know what Ms. Carl's talking about in terms of a police endorsement. When she's talking about waging war on police, let's talk about being accountable and making sure we deal with the issues we're talking about right now that led to the unfortunate death of Mr. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Mike Brown, and many others. While she's talking about waging a war, it's holding people accountable regardless of your occupation. And that's how we bring back trust in this whole criminal justice ecosystem, what makes it difficult when prosecutors want to hold a crime driver accountable in our community. When she talks about statistics, I don't know if she's talking about diversion programs in 2015 versus diversion programs, but no, 2016 when I took office in 2017 were totally different. We are the first to create prosecutor-led diversion programs. So for her to talk about screening, we had to reform and redo those programs because they were gun-related programs that the law became obsolete. So when you talk about statistics and facts, our diversion programs are cutting edge and leading the national charge of prosecutor-led programs. She's talking about money that I know nothing about other than one of her colleagues informed her on misinformation again, that is lies and misinformation that perpetuates her bias. She's never been about reform. And so I'm laughing because she was in the office with all this stuff taking place for 15 years, and she's never implemented any reform movement. How I thought right now is when I took place in that office as an assistant circuit attorney in 2005, I felt the same way. So that's why I became a legislator, to make changes. And I have a record to speak to debtors' prison, which is the ‑1 reason for Ferguson and many other issues that we're dealing with. So I didn't start this track record when I took office, but I've implemented reform-minded policies, national training in our office, as well as I don't seek any endorsements from any police union, nor did I win that in 2016. And she did, and she won it, and she took it. And you can also say you're not taking that endorsement, which she did.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Thank you. Sorry, the time is up. We want to thank both candidates for being with us and participating in our forum, Ms. Mary Pat Carl and Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. Once again, thank you very much for participating. Bishop,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bishop, our next group of candidates, Missouri's 5th senatorial district. We have 3 candidates in that race that we've invited. We have Alderwoman Megan Green, State Representative Stephen Roberts Jr., and Ms. Michelle Sherrod. Do we have all 3 on?
Looks like we do.
All right. So once again, to the candidates, you each have 3 minutes for opening remarks. If you don't use the 3 minutes, you get time at the end for closing remarks. Each candidate will be asked 2 questions, same 2 questions to each candidate. And so we're right on time, Bishop. And so we will begin with Alderwoman Megan Green. You have 3 minutes for opening remarks.
Sounds good. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thanks. So if you had asked me 9 months ago why I was running for Missouri State Senate, I would have told you 2 things. One, that Republican attempts to close our last remaining abortion clinic in the state require that we elect a champion for reproductive rights who's been on the front lines of these battles. And I'd also tell you that given Republican attempts to make Missouri the first state in the country to repeal Title IX protections for sexual assault survivors, that we need an advocate in Jefferson City who can talk with authenticity, coming from both personal experiences as a survivor and someone who has worked at a rape crisis center on a college campus to ensure that these laws do not get repealed here. But the world has changed in the last few months, and while these issues remain very important to me, the job of senator is much bigger than this, and the realm of what is possible in our world is much bigger than this. The times that we're living in require that we elect leadership that is both fearless and consistent, 2 things that I've proven myself to be time and time again. COVID has shown us a spotlight on every existing racial disparity that we have in our region. And it shows us what happens when there is generations of disinvestment and neglect in our Black communities. And it means that we need to elect someone who has worked to reduce Black infant and maternal mortality rates before she was ever elected to office, and has continued to fight for greater funding for our health department year after year after year to reduce these disparities and create a world that would have made it easier for us to weather COVID-19. But at the same time, you know, George Floyd has shifted the realm of what is possible in terms of public safety. Year after year after year during our budget cycle, the Board of Aldermen, I have called for us to decrease the extraordinary amount of money that we spend on policing and jails at our city at the expense of health and human services and affordable housing. I've been calling for defunding the police before we called it defunding the police. And this stance has no doubt cost me votes in the past, and it was and still is the correct stance. And by holding this stance over years and years and years, I've played a role in shifting the Overton window to move the conversation so that defunding the police and investing in a different public safety model is now something that is within the realm of possibility. But it's not just policing issues. I've stood with the Fight for 15 since its inception, before it was mainstream, before I was in office. And I fought to raise the minimum wage in the city. And when Republicans took it away, I mobilized and organized my supporters to collect signatures to help raise it statewide. As one of the few progressives on the Board of Aldermen, I've gotten pretty used to learning how to govern from a minority position.
30 seconds.
That our next senator, working in a Republican supermajority, needs to know how to do. I've learned how to work in partnership with grassroots organizers and activists to shift what is possible in the public consciousness and create people-centered power so we can eventually get the public policy wins, like raising the minimum wage and, God willing, like closing the workhouse and defunding police, which is so close to happening.
Thank you.
I'm ready to take our fights and voices to the state capitol to be
5 seconds. I'm sorry, 5 seconds.
And I'd be honored to have your support to get there.
Thank you. And to all the candidates, I try to give that 30-second time to allow you to kind of conclude your thoughts. So I apologize for interrupting, but it's the only way I know.
We got it. We got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Alderwoman. Representative Steve Roberts, you have 3 minutes for your opening remarks. And David, Ms. Sherrod indicated that she thought the Zoom was frozen. So if we could check on that, but right now we have Representative Roberts. You have 3 minutes for your opening.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Gray. And again, thank you to the St. Louis Clergy Coalition for inviting me to be here today. It really is my honor to speak with you all and tell you about some of my accomplishments in the state legislature and why I'd love to have your support in my journey to become our next state senator for the 5th District. I've served in the Missouri House of Representatives for the last 4 years. I'm currently the chairman of the Black Caucus, where I focused on our agenda on social and economic justice, women's rights, and voter empowerment. As you all may know, I previously served our city as a prosecutor on our felony armed offender unit, where I was able to see behind the curtain on underlying issues of violent crime, but more so than that, how the criminal justice system has had a disproportionate impact on our community. I remember when I just started there, I had a defendant who told me, we caught him for guns and drugs, and he wasn't a bad person. He was someone who was trying to survive, but I was 28 at the time, he was 26. And he told me that he didn't know how to read, he couldn't fill out a job application, and he had a 10-year-old son. And what else could he do? And I didn't have an answer for him at that time, but it led me to co-sponsor an adult high school bill that I worked on with one of my Republican colleagues. 2 years ago, it was signed into law. And last summer, I was able to be at the opening where we were, the grand opening for it. I was able to make sure that the first one opened in St. Louis. It's just off Locust behind the new police station. And because of that, they're able to offer several ancillary services. So, a lot of adults, it may have kids or something like that. So we're able to provide free health care so they can really focus on getting that high school diploma to earn a livable wage. So my focus in the House has really been looking at after our citizens who are most vulnerable, who need a second chance, which led me to sponsor House Bill 2711, which was a felony. What it did was that it provided a tax credit for employers who hired someone who had a felony conviction full time. And I was able to put in certain protections. They would, in order to be eligible for that type of benefit, they would have to have that person employed for 6 consecutive months. And we put that precaution there because if you're hiring someone for that extended amount of time, you've invested your time in them, you've trained them, you're not just going to hire them for a short-term benefit at that point. So situations like that where we can help employers, because I got to tell you, a lot of times when I'm in speaking with folks who have felony convictions, whether it's actual or perceived, they say to me, well, look, I've got a felony conviction. I can't do that. So my goal is to kind of create a suite of information that can be presented to employers because, otherwise when you've got 2 candidates, even if, someone who knows they've got a strike against them is willing to work harder, they might not get that opportunity. And you know, I've the past 2 years, not this present year because of the pandemic, but I've been ranked the most effective Democrat in the Missouri House as far as amending legislation on the House floor. In the 2019 session, I was ranked 17th out of 163 of us. So not only did I amend more legislation than any other Democrat, I was able to get amend more legislation than most Republicans as well. And that's why you need someone who can work on both sides out. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Did Ms. Sherrod, was she able to get on?
I was. Thank you.
Excellent. So you have 3 minutes for your opening.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Technology is amazing when it works. I'm Michelle Sherrod. I'm a candidate for the Missouri State Senate 5th District. And I want to thank you, the Clergy Coalition, this afternoon for this forum and giving all of us an opportunity to be heard and get our message out. A lot of individuals approached me and asked me to run. And my initial response was, I'm very busy with everything that I've got going on. But after I sat down and talked to Senator Nasheed and I talked to Senator McCaskill, with their advice and encouragement and numerous discussions with my husband, I entered this race to be the next senator for the 5th District. I know that my over 30 years of working in St. Louis and Jefferson City have prepared me to be the leader that St. Louis needs and deserves to represent the very diverse interests and communities that we have in St. Louis. As a daughter of a widowed mother who worked 3 jobs to take care of me and my 6 siblings, I learned the value of hard work, making good decisions when faced with difficult decisions, and sacrifices that must be made when she many times had to make choices between how to keep the lights on, pay the mortgage, get the car fixed, and feed and clothe all 7 of us. My mother worked 3 jobs most of my childhood, and I joined her in 2 of those jobs when I turned 12. I catered and cleaned houses, and I continued to clean as a small business owner who runs a janitorial service. Her drive and determination to take care of all of us was an inspiration for me to want more. As I left for college without enough dollars to pay for the semester, I was determined that I would figure it out when I got to college. And I was blessed to be able to work to put myself through undergrad and law school. The doors that education opened for me have allowed me to work as a certified public accountant for the largest accounting firms in the world, performing audits and preparing complicated tax returns, and to work as a licensed attorney. As the first African-American deputy state auditor working for Senator Claire McCaskill, I ran the office reviewing how our tax dollars are set and assessed for taxpayers all across Missouri. I reviewed every audit report. We work to bring transparency and hold our taxing jurisdictions accountable for how our tax dollars are spent. I understand budgets and numbers and that we need to use every dollar that we collect responsibly. When Claire was elected to the United States Senate, I ran the St. Louis regional office, meeting with the folks who knocked on the office door, looking for resources, met with seniors, small business owners, corporate executives, clergy, elected officials, and individuals hosting kitchen table talks, forums, and roundtables. I've met with city, urban, suburban, and rural constituents to discuss concerns and connect them to resources. I met with protesters, passionate constituents who marched in the street in front of the office,
20
who occupied
seconds.
the office all day, and constituents who wanted to share different perspectives. As my father-in-law and my mother, who both lived with us, began to need more care, my husband and I made a decision that I would come home, start a business in the home, and take care of our parents. I was blessed to care for both of them as I served as Claire's campaign treasurer and as a board member for the Jackie Joyner Kersey Foundation, where I currently serve as the board president.
Thank you, Ms. Sherrod.
Thank you.
And once again, I do apologize. I try to say 30 seconds, and I don't mean to interrupt people as you're in your train of thought. So please forgive me for that.
Okay, I'm sorry, Daryl, I didn't hear the 30, so.
That's all right. I may start doing something like, or something.
Okay.
Something. All right.
You're doing fine, Reverend Gray.
Okay, all candidates will receive the same question. And the first question will work backwards. So Ms. Sherrod, you'll respond first. Do you support closing the workhouse immediately? What will you do to help break the back and forth at the city level regarding its status, including recent efforts to place a non-binding poll on the ballot?
Thank you for that question. I think it's, a lot of times we hear an easy phrase thrown out there, close the workhouse. I think that one of the things that we have to focus on is why the workhouse exists. It exists because we have individuals that have committed a crime and they're either waiting for a hearing or they've had a hearing and they're being held there until they can be transferred someplace else. if we're going to close the workhouse and save the dollars associated with that, we have to make sure that we have a facility where we can house those individuals and make sure that we're keeping our streets safe. When that happens, I think it makes sense for us to close that workhouse, but to say close the workhouse without a real plan in place on what we're going to do with those individuals that are housed in that facility, I think would be premature.
Representative Roberts, your response.
Yes,
I can repeat if I need to repeat the question too, I will.
I'm good to go. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I am, but there's more needs to be done. So we've got to, this is why I filed the Cash Bail Reform Act of 2019 to prevent folks who are nonviolent offenders being unnecessarily confined until their trial dates. You know, what my piece of legislation would do is it would examine someone, you know, is this person a threat to a victim? Are they a danger to society? And are they likely to return to court at their court date? If they're not a threat and if they're likely to return, there's no reason for them, especially for a nonviolent offense, to be sitting in jail before that. You know, I've witnessed this firsthand. I remember one of my first jury trials as a prosecutor. I won the trial. It was a misdemeanor offense, but I found out afterward that that defendant had been sitting in jail longer than what the maximum sentence was for the crime. That's not how our criminal justice system is supposed to work. So when you've got low-level offenses, nonviolent offenders, there's no reason for them to be locked up and confined to the trial state, because, you know, how many days can you really miss at work before you lose your job? 1, 2, 3 at the most, or God forbid you're in jail, you've got a family to take care of, so you know you need to get back to work, so you just plead guilty to an offense you didn't commit just to get out, because the prosecutor is saying, look, you know, we're going to offer you probation for this, you know, I say it's no big deal, but that's still going to be a ding on your record. So for me, criminal justice reform, prison reform, these are the reasons why I ran for office, and that's what you'll continue to see for me to fight for as a senator.
Thank you. Alderwoman Green, same question.
I have been a very long time supporter of Close the Workhouse. I've been actively involved with the campaign and the organizers since the inception of the campaign to close the workhouse. I think we have to understand who's in there, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation about that. 98% of the people who are in the workhouse are pre-trial, meaning they have been convicted of no crime and they are legally innocent under the law. Of those people, 95% of folks who have been released on their own recognizance have returned to their court date without needing any kind of incentive to get them there. As of yesterday, we have 95 people sitting in the workhouse. That is it. And we are still allocating nearly $8 million per year to this facility. There are currently 250 openings in the St. Louis City Justice Center, which means that we could move the entire population of the workhouse over to the Justice Center today, close it down, and save nearly $8 million for a city that is on the brink of bankruptcy. It is common sense, and our conversations in the last month have moved beyond reform into defunding. And so it is time to defund the workhouse, and we have the ability to do that today.
Thank you very much. Ms. Green, Alderwoman Green, we'll ask you this question first, and then we'll go back. Do you support expanding voter access in Missouri, including automatic voter registration, non-excuse voting? What is your position on felony re-enfranchisement?
Yes to all of them. So, you know, these are easy questions today, Reverend. You know, so just a few weeks ago, I passed a resolution at the board asking our Board of Election Commissioners to send out absentee ballot applications to every registered voter in the city of St. Louis for the August and November elections. To date, they have not yet agreed to do that, but we are working on doing that. I think, you know, there's a lot of conversation around expanding voter access during COVID, but the truth of the matter is this should be done regardless of whether COVID exists. You know, voting by mail should exist whether COVID was here or not. Felon re-enfranchisement, actually, I don't think felons should ever lose their voting rights. So I don't think that we should be faced with re-enfranchisement, because I don't think you should lose your rights even if you're in jail. And you know, there should be no excuse absentee ballot voting or absentee voting. I've been a longtime advocate for all of those things, have worked to pass a resolution, as I said, and will be a champion for voting rights at the state level when elected state senator.
Representative Roberts, And forgive me, y'all, for these easy questions. I don't know what got into me. That was at 4:30 in the morning. Representative, do you support expanding voting access in Missouri, including automatic voting registration, non-excuse early voting, and what is your position on felony reenfranchisement?
Yes, sir. So starting at the last part of that question, absolutely in favor of, ensuring that people who are felons are able to vote and express that right. And this past legislative session, when we were working on our voting expansion bill, I was at the Capitol past midnight in discussions trying to make it as easy as possible for people to vote. So not only do we no excuse early absentee voting, we need to eliminate this notary requirement. I mean, imagine, you're trying to limit the spread of COVID-19, but you're requiring everyone to go see a notary. All you need is that one notary who's going to, notarize 50 different applications. There's an opportunity for that to spread, or that puts that person at risk, because then they're having to see however many people to get these ballots notarized in such a concentrated period of time. So we absolutely need no excuse early absentee voting. I've been had several conversations with our Secretary of State trying to get support for it, but we have different ideological views on that. I'm encouraged that with this last legislative session, there was a provision that I don't particularly like, but I think it helps us in a different way. And what that does is it creates, the Secretary of State's making these arguments that, well, we've got to protect against voter fraud and all these things. So he put in a provision that gives him subpoena power. So, I kind of want to hold him to it now. So you said you've got all these concerns, well, exercise your power, because I don't think he's going to find any of these examples. So it's really going to go to show that, this straw man argument that they're trying to make has no validity. So, you need a representative who kind of understands these different intricacies and can kind of like hold folks to the fire, and then back it up with the data as far as why we need no excuse absentee voting, but also why can be a safe and effective way to conduct our elections.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Sherrod, I'll repeat the question. Do you support expanding voting access in Missouri, including automatic voter registration, non-excuse early voting, and what is your position on felony reenfranchisement? Ms. Sherrod, are you on? Are you with us?
She needs to unmute herself.
Oh.
I think, Reverend Gray, that our community has been so disenfranchised and suffered so many injustices as we deal with the criminal justice system, and looking at our seniors, our young adults, folks who are coming out of the criminal justice system, re-entering our community. We have to make sure that we have an education process in place, that we make folks aware you have a right to vote. So many times as I've walked through the community and I've talked to folks on the street corner about their right to vote, and that if they are no longer, quote, on paper, as we like to say, i.e. you're not under a requirement to see a parole officer, that they do have the right to vote and that they need to get registered to vote. We need to make it as easy as possible for everyone to vote, whether that's an early voting system, whether that's a no excuse voting, and to make sure that we do not require a notary. I know that Senator Nasheed had filed a bill to allow felons to vote, and that's something that I will pick up as a senator, making sure that we are enfranchising as many people as possible with the right to vote and have representation that understands some of the things that we may not have, folks that have a voice at the table who understand what it is to have been incarcerated and to have your rights taken away, and allow them the opportunity to weigh in on who's going to represent our community.
Thank you very much. Because all of you have done so well in keeping your answers short, we do have an opportunity to do 2-minute closing. So Ms. Sherrod, I'll begin with you, followed by Representative Roberts, and then followed by Alderwoman Green. So Ms. Sherrod, you have 2 minutes. I'm going to be very strict with these 2 minutes, so I'll put my hand up in 30 seconds.
All right, thank you, Reverend Gray. Well, as I was sharing when we got started here, I'm running because I care. I'm running because I've been involved in our community as a small business owner, as a woman who has helped to raise several kids, as a wife, and now as a widow. I understand what it takes to raise a family. I understand what it takes to care for families and our elderly and to love on them until they pass. I understand what it takes as a small business owner to try to make sure that you're handling all the paperwork. I understand what it's like for a child to get up and not off of the floor, potentially not having had a bed to sleep in. I want to make sure that I am going to Jefferson City and picking up the mantle that Senator Nasheed was carrying, to make sure that our underserved or underrepresented have a voice in Jefferson City. When my husband and I started this journey of running for office, we talked about why I should be running. And it's the same reason now, even though he has passed, that I am continuing to run. I want to go to Jefferson City and be a voice for those folks in St. Louis who may not have had a voice. I know Senator Nasheed did an amazing job, and I want to continue that. I mean, we look at COVID-19 and the devastation that it's caused in our community, exposing the systematic injustices that we have known about in our community for a long time. But seeing our loved ones exposed, infected, and some dying from coronavirus, seeing the tragic death of Mr. Floyd, laying bare even more the fact that our community is impacted by the lack of education dollars for our children, lack of economic inclusion, the need for Medicaid expansion and access to affordable housing. Talking to the folks in our community about the criminal justice system and the impact that it's having on them, talking to them about the access to transportation that makes it difficult for them to get about in our community, which was really exposed during COVID-19. What we're experiencing right now and what we're going to be facing with the lack of tax dollars that we are going to see because of the impact of COVID-19, we need someone who understands budgets and can make a difference in Jefferson City. And I want to go to Jefferson City to be that person. I'm asking for your support and your vote on August 4th.
Thank you very much. Representative Roberts, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Someone much wiser than me once said the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable citizens. In my experience in the House and in the Senate, that's what my focus will continue to be. Last year, the governor signed a bill I'd worked on. It was a bill I turned into an amendment that would extend a tax credit provision for someone to make an accommodation to their home for a disability. You know, I've got a lot of seniors in my district, and some folks are in that position of, you know, am I going to be able to afford to stay in my home, or am I going to have to go to a senior living facility? And what this would do, it would allow that credit so they could make put in a ramp or a handicap accessible bathtub or widen a doorway for a wheelchair, anything that can be used arguably to make that type of accommodation so someone can maintain their independence. You know, that also led me to sponsor House Bill 2674, the Homestead Preservation Act. You know, the 77th district, it's a very vibrant district. It's got some of the wealthiest, but also some of the most neglected neighborhoods. And with all of this expansion that's going on in the region, you know, I have folks living in my district who have lived in these homes sometimes for their entire life. They've done everything right. They've planned for their retirement, but they're being priced out of their homes due to the value of their taxes on it being reassessed at a higher rate. So what this bill would do is it would lock in their property rate for the duration of their life. So they're not being penalized when there are these, you know, historically neglected neighborhoods, when there are new projects coming in, forcing them to leave their homes. Other states have similar pieces of legislation. And, you know, the real question right now is, I told you about what I've done in the House, why the Senate? Our senators have a unique, awesome amount of power. Not only do they have the ability to carry legislation, but to stop bad bills, given the rules of the chamber. So for example, in the House, you can't do a filibuster. In the Senate, you can stop bad bills like Senate Bill 43, a piece of legislation that I worked to stop in the House that made Missouri one of the most difficult states in the nation to prevail in a discrimination lawsuit. And in addition to that, it's being able to use those Senate rules to protect Missourians, to stop bad bills, and also to step up when there's an opportunity. That's why I started to the 63113 zip. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Green.
Thank you. I want to thank the Metropolitan Clergy Coalition for putting this together today and for having us all here to be able to say what unique aspects we bring to the table to represent the 5th Senate District. I think that elected officials need to be accountable to social movements. I think we need to be electing people who have stood on the front lines with our social movements. Whether it's fighting abortion bans or immigration bans, whether it's voting for defunding the police or funding social services, whether it is fighting for climate action to address the most existential crisis that we are facing today. I think it's important that we have elected representation who has stood on the front lines in all these battles, and who has been unwavering even in the times of very difficult support or very difficult pressure in their support of these issues. I've been proud to be somebody who has never taken an endorsement or a check from the Police Officers Association. I'm not their friend, and I think that's actually a very good thing in today's climate. I think we need to be pushing the envelope on what is possible in terms of public policy. And I've been a leader in doing that at the local level, being able to shift our dialogue about what we need to expect from our elected officials in terms of transparency, in terms of standing up to big money and to big power, and in terms of recognizing that conversations around reform with policing were so 6 years ago, and we are so far beyond that today. I've been proud to stand with our community in all of these battles, and I am proud to stand with our community in Jefferson City and carry the voices of folks that have been out protesting in our community for 6 continual years at this point in time.
30 seconds.
Up into our General Assembly. As I said earlier, I've learned how to govern from the minority position, and I've shown time and time again I'm a fighter. I'm that person that you know that you can count on to be up at the mic at 3 o'clock in the morning filibustering an egregious bill that the Republican Party is trying to push through. And so I ask for your vote and your support on August 4th so that we can elect a champion who we know is going to fight for us to represent us in Jefferson City.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I've got a question that just came in. It's a yes or no answer for all 3. So I'm going to ask you, it's so important, and the position that you're seeking is such a critical one. It's a simple yes or no. I'll begin with Ms. Green. Do you support the call of the city NAACP and the Carpenters Union to privatize the airport? Yes or no?
No.
Representative Roberts, do you support the call of the city NAACP and the Carpenters Union to privatize the airport?
It depends.
All right.
It's much more common. That's the best answer.
Okay, we'll take that. Ms. Sherrod, do you support the call of the city NAACP and the Carpenters Union to privatize the airport?
I would say no, not without a vote of the people.
All right. Thank you all very much. You have been very gracious in me trying to wave. Someone told me that if I just wave, I don't come on the screen, so you don't know when to stop. So I'm learning too. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. We're still on time.
Yeah, you're doing a fabulous job, Reverend Gray, and I tell you, you're the Energizer Bunny. So thank you so much. And I wanted to make mention also, Reverend Gray, we have Dr. E.G. Shields Jr. is on with 24-1 Clergy Coalition. So all of us are here, and I won't interrupt. Just go ahead and lead us into our next part because you've been doing a great job moderating. Thank you so much.
Excellent. I want to make sure, do we have all of our candidates on? We have 4 candidates, excuse me, for the last session. We have Ms. Jamie Tolliver, Mr. Jake Zimmerman, Dr. Sam Page, and Mr. Mark Montiavani. Do we have all 4 on?
I see Dr. Page and I see Mark. And I think that's the only 2 you have right now.
Okay, we're scheduled to
What were the 4 again, Reverend Gray?
Jamie Tolliver, Jake Zimmerman, Sam Page, and Mark Montiavani.
Okay.
Montiavani.
Again, I see Dr. Page and I see Mark Montiavani.
What we're going to do, once again, everyone was invited, everyone received their instructions to be on. And what we will do, because we have 2 of them on, and Mr. Montiavani is first on the list to give opening remarks. Hold on, I'm getting a call. Wait a minute. So, excuse me.
While he's doing that, thank you again for tuning in. This is being sponsored by the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition. However, we do have other clergy groups that are present. We have 24-1 Clergy Coalition with Dr. E.G. Shields Jr. And we also have Dr. Cassandra Gould with Missouri Faith Voices. And again, we're grateful for Dr. Starsky Wilson, who is the host of today's event with the Deaconess Foundation. Of course, Ed Bryant has been on with the United Way, and we're just appreciative of all of these that have tuned in. All right, Reverend
We
Gray,
do have, I do understand Mr. Zimmerman called. He said he is on the call. Jake, can you hear us? Okay, hold on. On the call, can you hear us now?
Yeah, he should have received an email from David at the Deaconess Foundation.
Okay, I just cut him off. That was me. Okay, everybody said they're both on. Mr. Zimmerman, can you hear us? They said they're on the call.
Okay, he's coming on now.
Excellent. Okay, we have 3, so we're going to go with the 3.
And who is John Clancy, Reverend Gray?
John Clancy is with Mr. Page's campaign.
Okay, all right then, so we're straight.
All right, so Ms. Tolliver is the only one that is not on. And to all of the candidates, welcome. Once again, to the candidates, each one of you has 3 minutes for your opening remarks. And then we will ask 2 questions. Each candidate will receive the same question. And depending upon the time that we have left, we'll give each candidate 2 minutes for a closing remark. So Mr. Mattiavani, thank you very much, Mark, for being on. And we'd like you to begin with your 3-minute opening statement.
Thanks, Reverend. Appreciate it. It's Mark Montavani. Even with all the vowels, you got an extra one in there.
There you go.
So it's Montavani. Just a word or two about my history. It's good to see you all again. As you know, over the years, this community's blessed my wife and me considerably in many ways. I've worn a lot of different hats in the community. I had a number of different career positions, been a civic and charitable volunteer, co-founded a law firm, left law practice to grow a small marketing company into one of the largest digital marketing companies in America, and created hundreds of jobs along the way. The fact is, I don't aspire to having a big fancy political career beyond service to St. Louis County, though it's probably notable that I was the only Democrat with the guts to run against a corrupt incumbent 2 years ago. But the fact is, I intend to seek no other office beyond this one. I aspire only to providing the leadership our community needs to achieve its potential. And I sort of consider it my duty to try to help our community. Really no secret why I'm running again, having done so 2 years ago. Our region in general and St. Louis County in particular continue to fail to meet their potential. Nothing has changed materially in the last 2 years. COVID-19 and recent instances of police brutality didn't create the problems our region faces. They've merely amplified our regional shortcomings, which include a stagnant economy and population base, racial disparities in health and education, jobs, transportation, insufficient regional collaboration, crime. We failed to achieve an equitable community, a suitable job growth, acceptable educational outcomes, public safety, and poverty mitigation. We all know these things to be true, yet oddly enough, we repeatedly elect the same politicians who see every decision through the prism of their own personal political aspirations rather than the needs of our community. Of course, it's likely that politicians will attack me. They'll mischaracterize my past, of course, and say I'm not a good Democrat, though roughly 90,000 Democrats voted for me less than 2 years ago. They'll say I'm inexperienced, though I'm the only candidate who has performed effectively in providing enterprise-level executive leadership in the past. They'll say I'm unfit for whatever reasons they can conjure up, though even my major opponent endorsed me in 2018. Why do they behave this way? Well, that's what politicians do. Look, my fundamental goals are to restore economic growth and create economic opportunity across the region, not to make the rich richer,
20 seconds.
so that we have the resources to tackle the social and economic challenges that our community faces. A brighter future for our community is possible if we have leaders who know how to position our community in the global and national economy in order to create growth. We haven't had a leader with experience in creating economic growth for decades, Never has real leadership been needed more than it is today. I ask for your favorable consideration of my candidacy, and if my hope to serve as county executive is realized, I look forward to working with you and for you in the years to come.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jake Zimmerman, you have 3 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Look, you're going to hear from 3 middle-aged white men who are all going to say the right things and who are all coming looking for your vote. And the question that you want to ask yourself is not just who's going to show up the week before the election. The question is who's going to show up the week after the election? Because we live in a St. Louis County right now that is riven by the terrible divide that runs through our community, even more so than 6 years ago on the terrible night when Michael Brown died, even more so than what we have seen in the entirety of my time in public service. Why? Because we face 2 plagues. We face COVID-19 and we face the terrible challenge of institutionalized racism that I assure you, and you don't need me to tell you, doesn't just happen in Minneapolis and New York and Atlanta. It happens right here in St. Louis County. And yet, we live in a St. Louis County where it was possible to get a COVID-19 test in Des Peres a month before it was possible to get one anywhere north of Delmar. And yet, we live in a St. Louis County where the hand-picked police chief of the county executive says there's no racism in the police department. It's not a problem. She doesn't even need to meet with African-American police officers because she already knows. This is not okay. When will we stand up and simply say that it's not right? None of this is a surprise. Prior to the epidemic hitting, it was still true from the county health department's own numbers that a woman of color living north of Delmar was twice as likely to have her child die in childbirth and twice as likely to have pregnancy complications as a white woman living south of that line. And yet, when this terrible plague hit this community, the same story, the same leadership or lack of leadership, all over again. This community has a choice. And after the disaster that was Steve Stenger, after the betrayal of trust, after the failure to lead, after the false promises and the empty words, everyone in this community ought to ask themselves, who can you trust not by their words, but by their deeds? You know me. You've seen me during my 15 years in public service. You know that I am someone who shows up in the community not just before the election, but after the election. Unlike my opponents in this race, I am committed because A, I am a real Democrat, B, I am a real progressive, and C, I am doing this because I want to make it better. I am not in backroom deals. I am not interested in political patronage. I am not interested in moving pieces on a chessboard. I'm Jake Zimmerman, and I want your vote because I believe we can make things right.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. County Executive Dr. Page, you have 3 minutes for opening remarks.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for letting me speak with you today. I'm Dr. Sam Page. I'm your county executive. I became county executive in April of last year, and from until then, I represented the 2nd district on the county council. I served as a state representative and served on the Creve Coeur City Council. I'm also a medical doctor, and until I became county executive, I was doing that full time, but I gave up my practice to focus my energy on the county executive's office. I have 3 kids, a wonderful wife named Jenny, who's also a doctor, and our dog Midnight, and 3 backyard chickens. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken most of my attention over the past few months, but my first priority has been to keep you all safe. And that's why St. Louis County issued stay-at-home orders just about before anyone in the country, helping us flatten the curve. And every decision we made is based on data and opinions of our public health experts. We are slowly reopening. We are watching the results to make sure this is the right course of action. And I'd be glad to talk more about what's going on. You can follow on our press briefings every 8:30, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8:30 in the morning, or you can follow it on your local media outlets, or you can follow on Facebook Live. We also created stlcorona.com to give daily updates, provide resources, and also has a transparency portal where you can follow along every dollar that's spent in the federal funds. Some communities have been harder than others. Black people are contracting and dying for the virus at higher rates than white people. We know and understand this. Racism is a public health crisis, and Black communities historically have not gotten the resources that they need in addressing that disparity. And that's been at the center of our COVID response. It's been at the center of so many of our policy decisions. Black lives do matter. In my administration, equity isn't a catchphrase. It's a bedrock principle, and it's reflected in everything we've done so far and in our plans for the future. That's why I worked with Dr. Jason Purnell to make sure that the funding we have in the federal grants goes to where it's most needed. We've dedicated $2.6 million to food security, $10 million in rental, mortgage, and utility help, and in homelessness prevention to keep our families safe at home. We've distributed 100,000 masks to our faith communities, dedicated $5.9 million to child care relief
30 seconds.
and our child care providers, and distributed over 600,000 masks throughout our whole St. Louis County. We look out for our most vulnerable. Our innovative strategy to help nursing homes has been recognized by the federal government as a national example for others to follow. And now the state has picked up our nursing home plan as well. Juneteenth is this Friday. It's a celebration of freedom, the abolishment of slavery.
Thank you, Dr. Page. I'm sorry.
Families, it's a time of reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. And for all of you, once I say thank you, you please feel free to finish your sentence. Feel free to finish your thought. We're going to begin. We've got 2 questions. We're going to ask so that we will have time for closing remarks. If you'll try to restrict your answers to 2 minutes, we're going to begin with Dr. Page. The corona pandemic exposed countless flaws and failures in the healthcare system, particularly as it became evident that Blacks were disproportionately affected by the virus. What could or would you have done differently as county executive?
Well, we actually were prepared for the COVID-19 epidemic in our community. I issued emergency orders and opened up the Emergency Operations Center before our first case arrived here in St. Louis County. What should have been done to address the epidemic and the disparities in our public health system should have started decades ago. We have disparities in our community that are reflected across the board in all of our institutions: healthcare, education, access to health insurance, food insecurity. It touches everything we do. The COVID-19 epidemic shined a spotlight on that. We knew that we would deal with these disparities, and that's why I asked Dr. Jason Purnell to come and help me identify the spots that we could focus our attention on, and that's exactly what we did.
Thank you, Dr. Page. Mr. Zimmerman, the same question. I'll repeat it if you like. The corona pandemic exposed countless flaws and failures in the healthcare system, particularly as it became evident that Blacks were disproportionately affected by the virus. What could or would you have done differently as county executive?
There's a lot that should have been done differently, and had it been done differently, lives would have been saved. And frankly, it's pretty shocking to me that your county executive can't even admit that anything should have been done differently other than decades ago. Let's start with the fact that COVID testing should have been made available in the portions of this community that, as he says, we knew were most likely to be hit. The first thing that should have been done differently was the testing and resources should have been available north of Del Mar, at minimum at the same time, available in the most affluent parts of the Central Corridor. The next thing that should have been done differently is there should have been real accountability and transparency in spending federal relief funds. Putting a prominent campaign donor in charge of spending the money and putting your best buddy on the county council in charge of so-called transparency without any actual accountability or any actual voting on appropriations for the money, that's not transparency. That's why you get no bid contracts. That's why you get backroom deals. But most of all, the federal government sent St. Louis County $170 million. And I don't know if you know much about Donald Trump, but I have a hunch that there won't be another $170 million when that bunch is gone. And what did this administration do? The first thing they did was they took about $15 million of that money and spent it on political patronage, on political slush funds for those folks on the county council as a payment to avoid that transparency that they so desperately wanted to avoid. So what would I do differently? I would spend every dollar of those relief funds on this community, on PPE, on testing, on treatment, on protection from folks who risk being evicted from their homes, and not $1 for political patronage.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Mr. Montavani, and I think I got it right this time.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I've got it. I think a lot has already been said. First of all, I think the administration can't have it both ways. You can't, on the one hand, indicate that you deserve nothing but a gold star about how well you've done, and then on the other hand, say that it disproportionately affects a community. In their defense, I think that there was a misunderstanding nationwide about the impact of the disproportionate effect in the early days. I don't think that St. Louis County was ahead of that curve at all. I think it was as late as everybody else in assessing the fact that it was going to hit the underserved part of our community harder. But there's certainly no reason to pat oneself on the back for how that level of performance came in. Secondly, the thing that irks me the most about the way the county executive has handled the coronavirus issue is I believe the communication has been just atrocious. There has been a level of dictatorial policy in terms of what's going to happen without any kind of meaningful collaboration with the municipalities, with the mayors, what's going on out in the neighborhoods. And I think that sort of approach is representative of how the administration approaches its daily activities. This could have been dealt with much better if there had been more collaboration across the community, more collaboration with other counties and with other cities. And the last thing I want to say is I'm a little tired of everybody patting the county executive on the back about our great performance with respect to the coronavirus. If you look at our statistics relative to other Missouri communities, St. Louis County has by far the highest rate of infection of any place in Missouri, with the exception of the city, which is about tied with. St. Louis County has twice the rate of infection as St. Charles County, 3 times the rate of infection as Jackson County. And yet, because nobody checks these statistics, somebody keeps talking about how wonderfully we've performed, and the facts just don't bear it out.
Thank you, Mark. Second question, and we will go in reverse order. So I'm sorry, it will go to Dr. Page first. The death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor sparked a massive multicultural movement in this country for police accountability. What have you learned from this moment? What would be your priorities in the demand to defund the police, keeping bad police out of law enforcement, and minimizing the power of police unions? Dr. Page?
Well, I think what we've learned is the things that we've always known about institutional racism in our country and all of our major institutions, including public safety. Those things that we have learned, the rest of the country and the rest of our community is starting to understand as well. And we see in the protests now a much more diverse representation of our community participating and engaging, and that's changed the conversation a great deal. And we've been pushing back in county government for a long time. Equity has been the cornerstone of everything that I've done, every complex policy issue that I've challenged. I've asked our police chief for a deep and thorough review of all of our policies. I've asked for them to show me how the can't wait for 8 policies are in place in St. Louis County, and then to review use of force and the training. I've already started a conversation with my staff about what a police department should look like, what procedures should be performed by police officers, and how we can get social workers and nurses embedded into our police department to handle some of those problems that shouldn't be handled by police officers. And as far as use of force policies, absolutely, we need to review those. What we saw with George Floyd was a wake-up call to our entire country. We've had video cameras on our St. Louis police officers, St. Louis County police officers for a long time. And I believe that's a game changer in the conversation about what really happened. Allows us to focus on the folks that are the problem and get the discipline that's appropriate in those type of settings.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman? same question.
Reverend Gray, what I just heard was a defense of the status quo. I heard some pretty words about fighting institutional racism, and I didn't hear an acknowledgement that this county executive's hand-picked police board, who hand-picked this new police chief, now got us a police chief who says on the record that racism isn't a problem in the St. Louis County Police Department. And what is worse, says that she does not even need to meet with the representatives of African-American police officers. That is unacceptable. In a Zimmerman administration, we will not put our heads in the sand. We will acknowledge the painful truth that there is racism, that it is real, and if you don't believe it, maybe talk to just one black cop and see what they have to say. In a Zimmerman administration, you won't just hear empty words. I have a real plan for police reform, not a defense of the status quo, not a claim that what we're doing is good enough. I'll share it with anyone who wants to see it. It's got about 20 bullet points and 3 pages, and it goes all the way to problems with law enforcement and cash bail, to the immediate needs of implementing the 8 can't wait requirements, banning chokeholds, and making sure not just in the county force, but throughout the county that we do a better job. And let's say one other thing on this subject. It is not an accident that 6 prisoners have died at the county jail in the space of approximately the past year. That jail has been badly run for a long time, and it wasn't made better when this county executive gave a patronage political appointment at a high-paying job to a staffer there. But what's even worse than the bad management is that when a prisoner lay dying on the floor of his cell,
20 seconds.
This county executive's administration claimed that he had access to health care, and it was only when the cellmate blew the whistle and said that actually he'd been there for 24 hours before they even paid attention. It's the lack of transparency with the public ability that's got to be fixed.
Thank you, sir. Mark, same question.
Thank you, Reverend. Look, no families in America should have to go to bed at night worrying about whether their children are going to encounter the wrong cop in the wrong situation at the wrong moment. No families should have to worry about their child losing their life because of the color of their skin. It's crucial that we not waste this moment. We have an opportunity now to create real fundamental change. So look, I'm going to tell you a little story here. You're probably aware that the St. Louis County Police Association endorsed me for this office. At the moment when they gave me their endorsement, I called the executive committee into a meeting and I said, look, I appreciate this very much. I'm gratified. I don't want to fight with the cops, generally speaking. I said, but look, I'm going to ask one thing of you, and that is that you're open to change. The fact is that policing in the St. Louis region is not consistent with some of the best practices across the country. The focus on using social workers, the focus on the community playing a bigger role with respect to the police relationship, the building of trust and whatnot. These things have been happening in the communities across the country for years. And I said to the executive committee of the association, look, I don't do maintenance. I don't want this job to keep things the way they are. If you're going to give me your endorsement, I want you to understand that I want you to get better. All of us have to get better every day. With respect to defunding, I think that's a horrible term because as a practical matter, some of these things are going to cost more, not less. It may cost more to put a social worker in a police car with a police officer in order to deal with those fundamentally social issues like mental illness or
30 seconds,
domestic violence and the like. So focusing on the budget without focusing on what the solutions are going to be, I think totally misses the point. But can police get better at their job? We can all get better at our job, and they certainly should be held accountability. And I've seen no resistance in my brief relationship with the County Police Association on being accountable when these horrendous acts of police brutality occur.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes each for closing remarks. Dr. Page, generally what we've tried to do is allow the incumbent to be last. I understand, Dr. Page, you have another engagement. I'm going to give you the choice of being first and last based upon our prior conversation.
No, that's fine. I can go ahead and appreciate your time today.
All right. So you have 2 minutes, Dr. Page.
Thank you. And thanks for letting me speak with you. There's a lot we talked about and a lot more to discuss. My office has released an annual report that goes over all the progress we made since the year I became county executive, including raising the minimum wage in county jobs, expanding sick leave and family leave, helping families stay home through Affordable Housing Trust Fund, implementing prevailing wage, implementing anti-bias training for police officers from their first years to the top brass. And there's a lot more. You can read it in the annual report online. But the bottom line is I'm committed to building a St. Louis County that is healthier, safer, more equitable, and my record as county executive demonstrates just that. I've been endorsed by labor, including the umbrella organizations of the building trades and the Labor Council, which represents more than 20 individual unions and clubs, as well as the St. Louis Young Democrats, St. Louis Indivisible, the Sierra Club, Planned Parenthood. There's a long list that can be found on sampage.com. I announced I was running for county executive long before the COVID pandemic, long before the murder of George Floyd, and I'm committed to running now with just as much intensity. We've seen a lot in our county and our community over the past year. I'm really disappointed to see so much negative campaigning in the race. That's not what I'm about, and that's not what you're going to hear from me. People's lives are at stake, and that's where I'm going to focus my attention. My experience as a medical doctor, on the ground and county executive, positions me well to take us forward over the next 2 years as we deal with some very, very difficult challenges in our community. And I would appreciate your vote and your support in the primary on August 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Page. Mark, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, well, look, my belief is that unless we create a big tent of engaged citizens in creating change in this region, we're not going to achieve anything. One of the problems that I have with my opponents is, frankly, they've been viewed as strict partisans over the course of their political careers, and they're going to be unable to build the kind of big tent that it's necessary to create fundamental change in our community. Progressives can't create the change that we need in St. Louis. There's just not enough. Business can't do it. African Americans can't do it. It's going to take everybody coming together. It's going to take a big tent to create the fundamental change that we need. And I believe that I'm the best candidate with the best opportunity to create that kind of movement to spark a rebirth of our region. Look, economic opportunity is at the core of my candidacy. If we don't create economic growth in this community, we do not have the resources to address our fundamental social challenges. The fact is that if the pie stays the same size in St. Louis, there is no more to be spent on the social challenges that we have. If we haven't seen this, we're not looking. The fact is that if somebody needs a bigger piece of pie and the pie stays the same size, that somebody else has got to have a smaller piece of pie. It doesn't work, especially not for those who have been underserved by our community. The way to create change in this community is to create a growing economic base so that there are more resources to address our fundamental changes. Our fundamental challenges are well documented: economic mobility and poverty and segregation and whatnot.
15 seconds.
But if we don't have the resources to deal with them, they're not going to change. So I'd ask you to think outside the box, to think about when we've had a leader that had any ability in the economic area, and to give me support so that we can create a different kind of economic future for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Zimmerman, you have 2 minutes for your final remarks.
Thank you, Reverend. Sam Page bragged about his endorsement from the building trades labor unions. Mark bragged about his endorsement from the St. Louis County Police Association. The endorsement that I'm the most proud of is the endorsement of the Fannie Lou Hamer Coalition of Democratic elected officials, African-American elected officials throughout North County, especially focused in the 24-to-1 footprint, the people who know what this community needs, the people who see the pain, the people who are there doing the work when too often regional leadership has left them behind. That's the kind of support I'm proud to have, and I hope to earn yours as well. Your current county executive presides over county leadership that has shoved problems under the rug, that has continued the status quo, that has continued policies that favor the affluent and the central corridor. That's why COVID testing was available south well before it was available north. That's why prisoners keep dying at the jail. That's why this very week you have minority contractors protesting outside of the St. Louis County government building, not just because they were ignored and the law was broken when they scrambled to spend money on no-bid contracts and to build a makeshift morgue in violation of the county's own MBE and WBE ordinances. They're also out there because the county executive refused to meet with them. Well, when I am county executive, and now as a candidate, I will meet with them because everyone needs a place at the table. This county executive and his handpicked police chief deny that racism is a problem and refuse even to sit down and engage with the Ethical Society of Police.
15 seconds.
I will meet with them because I care about everyone in this community, because I am committed to real change. And when I am your county executive, and God willing, with your support, together, we will work to make this community more equitable for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Well, Bishop Hankerson, we have concluded our candidates forum with our last candidate. This is recorded. We're going to make sure that we try to live stream it through Facebook and other social media outlets so people will see what we're trying to do. We've made it clear to candidates that even though we cannot endorse, we can inform and educate our constituents regarding people, position, and principles. So with that, I thank you very much on behalf of Dr. Sammy Jones, the chair of our Political Action Committee, and our committee members. I thank you for the opportunity you gave me to moderate this forum, and I turn it back over to you, sir.
You have done a tremendous and fabulous job, and hopefully you get a break before I bother you with another assignment. So catch a break before I find you in the next few minutes for something else.
Yes,
but
sir.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we're grateful for these that are seeking office that have chimed in. I do want to take notice of something. Sometimes it's the little things that go a long ways, and I noticed that Representative Steve Roberts has actually been on the line the entire time. I noticed little things like that. Michelle Sherrod, I noticed she's been on, and of course, Sheriff Betts stayed on for most of the time. And so little things like that go a long ways. And definitely all of these attendees that have been on representing various clergy associations, we appreciate them. I see Chris King, our friend from the St. Louis American. Thank you, Chris, for always making sure you get notices out in regard to all of our events that we do. Thank you also, Dr. Starsky Wilson, for hosting us today. The Deaconess Foundation has always done a wonderful and splendid job at hosting us. And David, you're on there. Can you let the people see you and at least say hello? I know you work behind the scenes, but you're the one that keeps these calls going for us, unless you slipped away. But nevertheless, he's there. We thank God for David facilitating today behind the scenes. All right, our time is up, and so there's no need for further remarks other than to make sure that everyone pushes for our constituents to register to vote and to be a part of these various races that are coming up in the next few fleeting moments. And so we want to mobilize our voters to participate in these particular races, as well as don't forget the 2020 census is upon us, and we must complete that because it's very imperative for the betterment of our community. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to ask that.
I wanted to, just one thing, Bishop, if you don't, but I didn't do it at the beginning. I should have shared that the theme that came to mind for this candidate forum was the question, what does the Lord require of thee? And the answer, to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. That's and good. So we endeavor all of our candidates to hopefully be guided by those words and asking, in submitting yourself for public service, what does the Lord require of thee? Seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly. So thank you very much, Bishop. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That's excellent. David will have this recording available for us a little bit later in the day. And as you stated, we are going to get that out on social media. We are actually live webcasting right now on the Deaconess Foundation YouTube page.
All right.
So people that are not on Facebook, they don't have to have an account to go and look at YouTube and see this webcast right now. Reverend Norris, won't you dismiss us at this time? I thank all of our Clergy Coalition members that have hung with me since early this morning. We started meeting at 9 o'clock and now it is 1 o'clock. So thank you for spending the day with your humble president. And thank you again, Reverend Gray, for facilitating. You've done a wonderful job and we thank you so much. Reverend Norris, at this time, will close us out.
Yes, well, I'd like to echo your sentiments and thanking Reverend Gray for an excellent job in moderating, and with Reverend Sammy Jones, working with him as well. I want to thank our speakers, all of our candidates in absentia and those that are present. I want to thank those that are viewing this as well. It's going to take all of us working together to make this what it needs to be. And so it is in that spirit, let us pray. We pray that the God of peace, the God of love, the God of joy, the God of understanding, the God of wisdom, that may rest, rule, and abide with us henceforth and forevermore, until we might all be able to meet again. And all God's people responded by saying, amen.
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 Thank you all so much for chiming in. We appreciate it much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.